He who has openly admired dictators, said he would be a dictator on day one. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has said he is a fascist to the core. So I think that when the American people reflect, especially those who are undecided, on who you should listen to, don't take my word for it. In fact, go online and listen to John Kelly, his voice, talking about what he thinks of Donald Trump 2 weeks before the election, because I think we all know, to your point, Anderson, it is close, but there are undecided voters who clearly, by being here, have an open mind, want to talk in a way that is grounded in issues and fact. And when they hear these facts, I think it compels a lot of people to be concerned about the future of our country with Donald Trump at the lead.
You've quoted General Milley calling Donald Trump a fascist. You yourself have not used that word to describe him. Let me ask you tonight, do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
For some reason, a lot of people think this is a tough question to answer, but apparently the vice president isn't one of those people.
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I also believe that the people who know him best on this subject should be trusted. Again, look at their careers. These are not people, with the exception, I think, of only Mike Pence. These were not politicians. These are career people who have served in the highest roles in national security, who have served as generals in our military, who are highly respected. Talking about the person who would be commander-in-chief.
Now that Trump's longest-serving chief of staff has come forward and warned the country of the fascist nature of the former president, it's time for his defenders to find a way to reject that truth without bashing a conservative general. So, as you can imagine, the excuses and deflections were all over the place.
You mentioned some of the things that people have been saying about Donald Trump, but it's not just people. His longest-serving chief of staff, Marine General veteran John Kelly, calling Trump a fascist, who said Hitler did some good things. Retired General Mark Milley, who Trump picked as his Joint Chiefs of Staff, described Trump as a fascist to the core and the most dangerous person to the country. These are people who spent a good deal of time working with Donald Trump. Do any of these warnings from his own former cabinet members give you pause about your support for Donald Trump?
Well, there, hundreds, if not thousands, or millions of people that have either know President Trump, worked with President Trump, that have great things to say about him. This is typical at the end of an election where everybody comes out and shares their opinion. But the thing that I do know is his record, and his record, say, on Israel, is that no president has ever been stronger in supporting our ally, Israel. What President Trump did for Israel was incredible. Whether it's the embassy, whether it's Golan Heights, the Abraham Accords, just unequivocal support for Israel. And then we've got Vice President Harris, who just last week, was on tape saying that Israel was, committing genocide. And so if you talk about, what someone said about Trump 5 years ago, about what Vice President said, what she said 5 days ago, I think the record,
John Kelly said that now. Yeah, John Kelly said that now, his longest-serving chief of staff. That was something he said 2 days ago.
Yeah, talking about 5 years ago.
What you're going to see are similar versions of a few different tactics in hopes of dismissing these very serious revelations about a candidate that Trump supporters would 100% dismiss if it wasn't Trump. Burgum started with one, saying there are people that say good things about him, before bringing up something completely unrelated, like support for Netanyahu's genocidal plans in Gaza, which actually is Harris's worst policy.
Again, if you've got, and I appreciate anyone who's served in the military and appreciative of their support. But, if he had concerns, he could have said it when he was working for him 5 years ago. He could have said it when he left the White House. He waits till 12 days before the election. And this is a time where this rhetoric has been around. In 80 years ago, coming out of World War II, Harry Truman was saying the same things about his opponent. So it's not a new thing in America that we have this kind of rhetoric at the end of the thing. And I think we have this case. Americans could actually look at the record of President Trump versus Harris, and I think the differentiation is clear. And on the things that matter to voters, a secure border, safe cities, affordable food, gas, an energy policy that strengthens America as opposed to strengthen our adversaries.
Burgum then covered excuses like They're just saying this 2 weeks before the election, as if being a fascist isn't relevant based on how soon the election is, while also making sure people know that while he calls General Kelly a liar, that he respects the military. Doesn't make sense, but he wrapped it up with, just look at their records, which also doesn't bode well for the former president that sat around ignoring a pandemic while hundreds of thousands died, and while his proposed tax cuts benefited the richest Americans. But again, the point is to avoid the topic.
No, look, I respect General Kelly. I think he's great. He's got a long-term relationship with the president. When you get into these final weeks, it's all about results. So of course you're going to get salacious things said and all that. And I'm not taking away the general's conversation with the former president. But at the end of the day, what that poll that your team was just looking at, independents want results. They don't want that kind of ultra liberal extremism. They want to be told the truth. They want to get their cost of living down. That's where voters are going to go.
Sununu hit the final couple of weeks talking point that Doug Burgum went for right off the bat, then launched into the standard of claiming that he still respects the retired general and the several other military leaders that made similar statements about Trump, before then claiming that no one cares that we may be electing a fascist because of issues Trump has absolutely no plans to address.
In supporting the ticket, in saying that is saying that you're going to support someone who Marine General John Kelly says fits the definition of fascist, for sure, he says. John Kelly says that Trump, quote, certainly prefers the dictator approach to government. In supporting the ticket, that is something that you're supporting. Yeah. Is that something you are okay with?
No, look, I don't think anybody should be okay with statements like that, of course. And if there's ever anyone you don't want any sort of comparison to, it's Hitler and all of that sort of thing. As we've discussed before, I think it's not just what Chris Sununu is going to be voting for. I think most of America is going to go this way. I do think Trump wins this thing in the end, and it's about that change. People are willing to say, look, I don't like his style. I don't like his approach. I don't like the things he says. But if we can get a Republican mindset out of Washington that says you come first as an individual, not big governments. States' rights matter. Regulatory reforms, we're going to cut regulation out. We're going to make things a little easier in terms of costs. We're going to handle the inflation. I know the media likes to talk about the salacious stuff, but I'm just trying to say whether it's Chris Sununu or 50% plus one voter that are likely going to win this thing for Trump, that's what America cares. I don't know any American that would like any of those comments, right? No, there's nobody in America that would likes to hear that conversation about a potential future president of the United States. But that's how bad things are. That's how bad the Harris campaign has run things. That's how bad her message is, and that's how bad the last 3.5 years has been.
Kate Baldwin forgot to remind Sununu that characterizing Trump's fascism simply as people not liking the story or Trump's style and approach isn't the same as his proposed desire to implement a dictatorial regime that utilizes the military to go after political opponents that he's openly named as the enemies within. The idea is to make fascism acceptable, as if it doesn't affect all those policies that he claims voters care more about than authoritarianism.
And I'll submit to you that Trump makes offhand comments all the time, all right? But they don't mean anything, and he doesn't even remember them 30 seconds later. This is another trumped up, and I predicted it would happen. I think you might have, too, if the Democrats were listening in the last part of the campaign, they would bring out all of this stuff, which they are. Now, I believe this is going to backlash against Kamala Harris, who made a big mistake today. She, in the beginning, floated above it, which is a smart play, but then came out in front of the microphones and called Trump a Hitler lover, okay? Which he's not. Mick Mulvaney on this network said, look, I've been around him, he never said anything. Geraldo's known him for 30 years. I've known him for 30 years. We never heard any of this. And there is a pattern of behavior about people, as you know. All right, if they're obsessed or even interested in a subject, it comes up. So what is likely to have happened is that Trump was mad at Milley or one of his generals and said, they should be loyal to me, or something like that. Had nothing to do with Adolf, had nothing to do with what the mass murder in World War II. But the media takes it, the hate Trump media, and then throws it out that Trump is Hitler light. This is so hateful. And Harris should have stayed above it, but now she's in it, and that's going to tee people off.
Now, Bill O'Reilly might have the worst deflection so far. He wants people to not worry about revelations of a fascist leader because as soon as he pitches using the military as his personal army of retribution for people that don't praise him, he just forgets about it 5 minutes later. Talk about cognitive decline. He also went with the previously used "it's the final weeks of the election" excuse right before he got creative and found a way to blame VP Harris for calling Trump a fascist based on John Kelly's explicit comments about him being a fascist. He was like, you don't want to anger people by taking several of his closest officials at their word. All of these defenses and many more are making the rounds, but as usual, they lose their effectiveness as soon as the guy that they're protecting gets to typing. Comrade Kamala Harris sees that she's losing and losing badly, especially after stealing the race from crooked Joe Biden. So now she's increasingly raising her rhetoric, going so far as to call me Adolf Hitler and anything else that comes to her warped mind. She's a threat to democracy and not fit to be president of the United States. And her polling so indicates, because the way to push back on your opponent calling you out is to claim that she's a threat to democracy, as you demand that they tone down the rhetoric. And the best way to convince people that all these reputable officials that worked extremely closely with you are lying is to lash out at them like a madman that would emotionally and baselessly attack their character with the standard accusation of Trump derangement syndrome. Thank you for your support against a total degenerate named John Kelly, who made up a story out of pure Trump derangement syndrome hatred. This guy had two qualities which don't work well together. He was tough and dumb. The problem is his toughness morphed into weakness because he became jello with time. The story about the soldiers was a lie, as are numerous other stories he told. Even though I shouldn't be wasting my time with him, I always feel it's necessary to hit back in pursuit of the truth. John Kelly is a lowlife and a bad general whose advice in the White House I had no longer sought and told him to move on. His wife once told me at Camp David, "John admires you tremendously, and when he leaves the military, he will only speak well of you." I said, "Thank you."